The morning sky above New Tokyo burned with an unnatural crimson light as massive shadow shapes descended through Earth's atmosphere. Doctor. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the reinforced glass of the International Defense Command Center, watching in horror as alien vessels the size of city blocks blotted out the sun. The ships moved with deliberate precision, their sleek obsidian hulls reflecting the chaos erupting below. How many? Admiral Harrison's voice cut through the stunned silence of the command center. Lieutenant Torres's hands trembled as she read the displays. Orbital sensors detect over 300 vessels, sir. They're positioning themselves above every major population center on the planet. Sarah turned from the window, her mind racing. As Earth's lead xenobiologist, she had spent years theorizing about first contact scenarios. None of her models had prepared her for this. The ships weren't broadcasting any signals, weren't attempting communication. They simply hung in the sky like vultures waiting for carrion. The first attack came without warning. A beam of searing blue energy erupted from the lead vessel over New Tokyo, carving through the city's defensive grid like tissue paper. The Yamato defense platform, humanity's most advanced orbital station, vanished in a flash of superheated metal and atmosphere. Across the globe, similar scenes played out as Earth's defenses crumbled within minutes. Admiral Harrison activated the global emergency broadcast. This is Admiral Harrison of the United Earth Defense Force. We are under attack by an unknown alien force. All military units are to engage immediately. Civilian populations should seek immediate shelter. Sarah watched the tactical displays update in real time. Moscow's shield generators failed. The Australian defense network went dark. The European Union's orbital mirror array shattered into glittering debris. In less than an hour, 3 centuries of human technological advancement had been reduced to smoking ruins. Sir, we're receiving a transmission. Communications, Officer Blake announced, his voice tight with fear. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a creature that would haunt human nightmares for generations. The being was tall and gaunt, with elongated limbs and skin that seemed to shift between shades of gray and green. Its face was dominated by large, multifaceted eyes that gleamed with cold intelligence. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of absolute authority. I am Commander Zethkar of the Vorthak regime. Your species has been deemed a threat to galactic stability. Your rapid technological advancement and aggressive territorial expansion cannot be tolerated. You will surrender unconditionally, or face complete annihilation. Admiral Harrison stepped forward, his jaw set in determination. I am Admiral Harrison, speaking for the United Earth government. We demand to know why you're attacking us. We've never encountered your people before. We pose no threat to anyone. The alien's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Your ignorance is expected. For the past 50 Earth years, we have observed your species' expansion into space, your construction of weapons, your conflicts, your insatiable hunger for resources. You exhibit all the characteristics of a plague species. That's not true, Sarah interjected, stepping into the camera's view. We're explorers, scientists. We seek knowledge and peaceful contact with other species. Commander Zethkar's compound eyes focused on her with unsettling intensity. Your Sydney colony's antimatter research, your Mars industrial complexes, your asteroid mining operations that strip entire systems bare. These are the actions of a species that consumes without regard for consequences. Sarah felt her heart sink as she realized the aliens had been watching humanity's expansion into the solar system. Every mining operation, every research station, every defensive platform had been catalogued and judged. The Vorthak had seen humanity's growth and decided they were a threat that needed to be eliminated. You have 1 Earth rotation to surrender, Commander Zethkar continued. Disable all military assets, abandon all off-world colonies, and prepare for integration into the regime. Resistance will result in the complete sterilization of your planet. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Outside, the alien ships continued their ominous hover, their weapons trained on the cities below. Sarah could see streams of smaller craft emerging from the main vessels, descending toward the surface like metallic locusts. Integration, Admiral Harrison spat. They mean slavery. Lieutenant Torres looked up from her console, her face pale. Sir, we're getting reports from the outer colonies. The Vorthok have already hit Luna Base, Mars Central, and the Europa Research Station. Casualties are extensive. Sarah closed her eyes, thinking of the thousands of researchers, families, and children living on those stations. The Vorthok weren't just making threats. They were demonstrating their power. The message was clear. Resistance was futile. Admiral, Dr. Reynolds from the Science Division interrupted. We need to consider their offer. They have superior technology, superior numbers. Fighting them would be suicide. And surrendering would be the end of human freedom, Admiral Harrison replied firmly. I won't hand over our species to become slaves. Sarah moved to the central holographic display, studying the alien ship formations. Something bothered her about their positioning. The vessels maintained perfect geometric patterns, never deviating from their assigned coordinates. Their smaller craft followed predetermined flight paths with mechanical precision. They're too organized, she murmured, drawing confused looks from the others. What do you mean? Admiral Harrison asked. Look at their formations. Everything is perfectly symmetrical, following mathematical patterns. Even their communication was formal, ritualistic. This isn't just a military operation, it's following some kind of protocol. Lieutenant Torres nodded slowly. The way they announced themselves gave us exactly 24 hours. Attacked our defenses, but not civilian targets. It's like they're following rules. Rules that we don't understand, Admiral Harrison said grimly. But understanding them won't help us fight ships that can vaporize our best defenses. As if summoned by his words, explosions erupted across the city below. The Vorthak ground forces had begun their assault. The smaller craft Sarah had observed were now revealing their purpose, disgorging armored soldiers onto the streets of New Tokyo. The beings moved with the same mechanical precision as their ships, advancing in perfect formation toward strategic targets. Sir, ground forces are requesting immediate support, Lieutenant Torres reported. The alien soldiers are advancing on the government district, the power stations, and the communication hubs. Admiral Harrison watched the tactical display update as red zones spread across the city map. They're not trying to kill everyone. They're capturing infrastructure. They really do want to integrate us, not exterminate us. Sarah felt a chill as she realized the implications. They've done this before. This is their standard operating procedure for conquering species. They've probably integrated dozens of civilizations this way. The ground battle raged for 6 hours. Human soldiers fought valiantly, but their weapons barely scratched the Vorthak armor. The aliens' energy weapons cut through Earth's military like a hot knife through butter. Tank rounds bounced off their personal shields, and even direct hits from artillery had minimal effect. As night fell, the Vorthak had secured every major city on Earth. Their ships maintained their positions, casting the planet in an alien shadow. The message was clear. Resistance was not just futile. It was impossible. In the command center, Admiral Harrison received surrender requests from military commanders around the globe. The President of the Americas had gone missing when the Vorthak overran Washington. The European Council had voted to negotiate. The Asian Federation was preparing to lay down arms. Sir, Lieutenant Torres said quietly, we're receiving another transmission from the Vorthak. Commander Zethkar appeared on screen again, his compound eyes reflecting the lights of burning cities below. Your resistance has been noted and found inadequate. Your species fights with primitive weapons and lacks coordination. You will surrender now, or we will begin targeting civilian population centers. Admiral Harrison felt the weight of 7 billion lives pressing down on his shoulders. Every instinct told him to fight, to never give up. But the tactical reality was undeniable. Earth's military had been swept aside like children playing with toys. "We need time to coordinate the surrender," Admiral Harrison said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "You have 6 Earth hours," Commander Zethkar replied. "Any aggressive action will result in immediate retaliation. Your ships will remain grounded, your weapons powered down. Your leaders will report to designated collection points." As the transmission ended, Sarah noticed something in the alien commander's expression. Confidence, certainly, but also something else. Boredom. This was routine for the Vorthak, just another planet to add to their empire. "They underestimate us," she said quietly. Admiral Harrison looked at her with hollow eyes. "Sarah, they just crushed our entire military in less than a day. What exactly are they underestimating? Our unpredictability. They see us as another primitive species following predictable patterns. They've studied our technology, our military tactics, our expansion patterns, but they haven't studied our spirit." Lieutenant Torres looked up from her console with the first spark of hope she'd shown all day. "Dr. Chen's right, sir. The Vorthok operate like machines. Perfect coordination, following protocols, no deviation from established patterns. But humans, we improvise." Admiral Harrison stood silently for a long moment, staring at the tactical display. The Vorthak ships maintained their perfect formations. Their troops followed predetermined routes. Their entire operation ran like clockwork. It was impressive, overwhelming, and completely inflexible. "What are you thinking, Admiral?" Sarah asked. Harrison turned to face his remaining staff, and for the first time since the attack began, he smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "I'm thinking," he said slowly, "that the Vorthok have never encountered humans before. They've studied our technology and our expansion, but they've never seen what we're really capable of when our backs are against the wall." Outside the command center, the alien ships continued their silent vigil over a conquered Earth. But in the depths of military bunkers, research facilities, and civilian shelters, something the Vorthok hadn't anticipated was beginning to stir. Humanity was about to show them exactly why they had survived every extinction event their planet had thrown at them. The Vorthak had won the first battle, but they were about to discover that humans had a very different definition of surrender than every other species they had encountered. 3 months had passed since the surrender, and Commander Zethkar stood in the converted human assembly hall, reviewing integration reports with growing frustration. The massive chamber, once used for global diplomatic meetings, now served as the primary Vorthak administrative center on Earth. Holographic displays surrounded him, showing status reports from conquered human settlements across the planet. "The efficiency ratings are unacceptable," he announced to his subordinates. "Human productivity remains 40% below projections. Compliance with work assignments is sporadic, and we continue to experience equipment failures at an alarming rate." Sub-Commander Nethril approached, his own compound eyes reflecting concern. "The humans claim the equipment failures are due to their unfamiliarity with our technology, but the pattern suggests deliberate sabotage." Zethkar's mandibles clicked in irritation. In 50 years of conquest, he had never encountered a species that proved so difficult to integrate. Most civilizations accepted their new reality within weeks. The humans had submitted to processing, had been assigned to appropriate work details, and had been provided with adequate shelter and nutrition. By all measures, the integration should have proceeded smoothly. Instead, productivity reports showed constant irregularities. Mining operations on Mars suffered mysterious equipment breakdowns. The lunar processing facilities experienced power fluctuations that their technicians insisted were impossible. Even on Earth, the simplest assignments seemed to result in unexpected complications. "Show me the Terra 7 mining report," Zethkar ordered. The holographic display shifted to show an asteroid mining operation in the outer system. The human workforce assigned to the facility had somehow managed to reduce ore processing efficiency to 30% of target levels, while maintaining the appearance of full compliance. "The human supervisor claims their workers lack the proper training," Sub-Commander Nethril reported. But our observation drones record them performing tasks correctly when they believe they are unobserved. This confirmed Zethkar's suspicions. The humans were engaging in what their historical records termed passive resistance. It was a concept alien to Vorthok thinking. When conquered, a species should recognize the superiority of their conquerors and adapt accordingly. The humans seemed incapable of this logical response. Meanwhile, deep beneath the ruins of Geneva, Dr. Sarah Chen crouched in a maintenance tunnel that had once serviced the old CERN particle accelerator. The tunnel system had been abandoned decades ago when the facility moved off-world, but it provided perfect cover for the resistance network that had slowly grown in the months since surrender. "The Vorthak are getting suspicious," whispered Colonel Rodriguez, the highest-ranking military officer who had avoided capture. "Our people in the processing centers report increased surveillance." Sarah nodded grimly. The resistance had been walking a careful line, appearing to comply with Vorthak orders while systematically undermining their operations. It was a strategy born of necessity rather than choice. Open rebellion was impossible. The aliens' technology remained overwhelmingly superior. "Any word from the Prometheus group?" she asked. Rodriguez smiled for the first time in weeks. Dr. Patel's team made contact yesterday. They're still operational and have been analyzing captured Vorthak technology. They think they've found something important. The Prometheus group consisted of scientists who had been working on a classified project in the outer system when the invasion began. Their research station, hidden in the shadow of Neptune's moons, had somehow avoided detection. For 3 months, they had been humanity's only free, scientific facility. "The Vorthok think in patterns," Sarah continued, checking her makeshift communication device. "Everything they do follows established protocols. That's their strength, but it's also their weakness. They can't adapt to situations that don't fit their models." Above ground, the integration process continued. Humans were processed through classification centers where Vorthak technicians determined their optimal use. The intelligent ones were assigned to technical roles under alien supervision. The strong ones went to mining and construction operations. The rest were classified as general laborers. What the Vorthok didn't understand was that humans had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of appearing compliant while planning rebellion. Every processed human became a potential intelligence asset. Every work assignment placed resistance members in positions to gather information and identify weaknesses. Marcus Webb had been classified as a general laborer and assigned to maintain the Vorthak Command Center in former New York. As he cleaned floors and emptied waste containers, he memorized guard routines, noted security protocols, and identified critical systems. The aliens saw him as harmless, beneath notice, which made him invaluable to the resistance. "Their patrols change every 72 hours, he reported during a clandestine meeting in an abandoned subway station. "But the pattern repeats every week. They're completely predictable." Lisa Park, a former software engineer now assigned to data processing, had made an even more significant discovery. Their computer systems are incredibly advanced, but they're locked into rigid programming. They can't conceive of someone accessing data through methods that aren't explicitly programmed. She had discovered that by performing her assigned tasks in a slightly different order, she could create temporary access windows to restricted databases. The Vorthak monitoring systems weren't programmed to recognize these variations as security breaches. Through these combined efforts, the Resistance had begun mapping the true scope of the Vorthak Empire. The aliens controlled 47 star systems, each containing multiple species that had been integrated over the centuries. The pattern was always the same: overwhelming technological superiority, rapid conquest, and systematic integration of the defeated population. But the intelligence also revealed something else. The Vorthok Empire was showing signs of strain. Managing 47 star systems and dozens of species required enormous resources. Each conquered civilization had to be monitored, controlled, and kept productive. The Empire was a massive machine that depended on absolute efficiency to function. "We're not trying to defeat them militarily," Sarah explained to a gathering of resistance cell leaders. We're trying to make them realize that conquering humanity costs more than it's worth. This strategy required careful coordination. Too little resistance, and the Vorthok would simply continue their integration process. Too much, and they would respond with overwhelming force. The goal was to create a constant drain on their resources while appearing to be nothing more than an incompetent species struggling to adapt. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. James Nakamura had been assigned to assist with Vorthok research into human psychology. The aliens were trying to understand why their integration protocols weren't working as efficiently as expected with humans. During his sessions with Vorthok psychologists, Nakamura discovered that the aliens were collectively incapable of understanding individual initiative. Their society was built on perfect hierarchical order. Every Vorthok knew their place in the hierarchy and followed orders without question. The concept of individuals making decisions contrary to the orders of their superiors was literally incomprehensible to them. They see our resistance as a systematic flaw in their integration process, Nakamura reported. They're trying to debug us like we're malfunctioning software. This revelation changed the resistance strategy. Instead of trying to hide their activities, they began making them appear random and systematic. Equipment failures were timed to seem like natural wear patterns. Work slowdowns were orchestrated to look like learning curves. Acts of sabotage were disguised as accidents or mistakes. The Vorthok response was predictable. They increased training programs, modified their equipment for human use, and adjusted their protocols to account for human inefficiency. Each modification required resources, time, and administrative overhead. Commander Zethkar found himself spending increasing amounts of time managing the human integration project. Reports flowed in daily detailing new complications, required adjustments, and protocol modifications. What should have been a routine conquest was becoming a significant drain on regime resources. Perhaps we should consider the sterilization option, Sub-Commander Nethril suggested during a particularly frustrating briefing. The humans may be too primitive to integrate properly. Zethkar's compound eyes dimmed with consideration. The suggestion had merit. Complete sterilization would eliminate the integration problems and allow the regime to utilize Earth's resources more efficiently. But it would also represent a failure of regime doctrine, which held that all intelligent species could be successfully integrated given proper procedures. The High Command would view that as an admission of incompetence, Zethkar replied. We will continue with integration protocols while implementing enhanced compliance measures. The enhanced compliance measures included increased surveillance, stricter work quotas, and punishment details for underperformers. But the humans adapted to each new restriction with frustrating creativity. Surveillance drones suffered mysterious electronic interference. Work quotas were met through methods that somehow reduced overall efficiency. Punishment details became opportunities for resistance members to gather intelligence and plan new operations. 6 months after the conquest, Commander Zethkar received a summons that chilled him to his core. The High Command wanted a personal report on the human integration project. In Vorthok society, such summons usually preceded significant disciplinary action. As he prepared his presentation for the High Command, Zethkar reviewed the stark statistics. Human productivity remained below acceptable levels. Resource allocation for the integration project had exceeded projections by 300%. Other conquered species were beginning to show signs of similar inefficiencies, possibly influenced by contact with human workers. The most troubling development was the pattern analysis conducted by regime scientists. The data suggested that human resistance wasn't random or instinctive. It showed signs of coordination and planning that implied a level of organization that should have been impossible under their surveillance systems. Deep in the tunnels beneath Geneva, Sarah Chen received the report she had been waiting for. The Prometheus group had completed their analysis of captured Vorthok technology, and the results exceeded her wildest hopes. The Vorthok aren't just technologically advanced, Dr. Patel's transmission explained. They're technologically dependent. Their entire civilization runs on automated systems that require constant maintenance and resource input. They've created a society so complex that they can't function without absolute efficiency. The implications were staggering. Every human world that performed below expectations forced the Vorthak to divert resources from other operations. Every malfunction required technical support that could have been used elsewhere. Every protocol modification consumed administrative capacity that the Empire desperately needed. We're not fighting the Vorthak, Sarah realized. We're fighting their entire system of control. The resistance strategy evolved again. Instead of trying to damage Vorthak operations, they focused on making them as resource-intensive as possible. Simple tasks were performed in ways that required additional supervision. Minor problems were escalated through proper channels, consuming bureaucratic capacity. Training programs were attended with enthusiasm while somehow failing to improve performance. The cumulative effect was devastating to regime efficiency. The Human Integration Project, which should have been completed within months, was consuming resources that the High Command had allocated to expansion into new territories. Other species in the Empire began to take notice of the fact that the newest additions seemed incapable of proper integration. Commander Zethkar stood before the High Command in the Great Throne Chamber on Vorthak Prime, his career and possibly his life hanging in the balance. The assembled leadership of the regime regarded him with the cold calculation that had conquered 47 star systems. "Explain the human situation," commanded High Admiral Kethmore, his ancient compound eyes reflecting centuries of successful conquest. Zethkar activated his presentation, showing the productivity charts, resource allocation reports, and efficiency analyses that painted a picture of systematic failure. Every statistic told the same story. The humans were costing the regime far more than they were worth. The humans appear to suffer from an inherent inability to adapt to proper, hierarchical structure, Zethkar explained. Despite extensive integration efforts, they continue to exhibit chaotic and inefficient behaviors. High Admiral Kethmore studied the data with growing concern. The regime's success depended on the efficient integration of conquered species. Resources spent on Earth were resources that couldn't be used for expansion or maintenance of other territories. "Your recommendation?" the High Admiral demanded. Zethkar had prepared for this moment. Complete withdrawal from the human system. The species is too primitive for successful integration. The resources currently allocated to their management could be better used elsewhere. The silence in the throne chamber stretched for long minutes as the High Command considered this unprecedented recommendation. In 500 years of expansion, the regime had never abandoned a conquered territory due to integration difficulties, but the mathematics were undeniable. The human project was bleeding resources at an unsustainable rate, and the infection was beginning to spread to other integrated species. For the first time in their history, the Vorthak were facing a species that was more expensive to control than to abandon. High Admiral Kethmore's decision would determine the fate of both species. But in the tunnels beneath Earth, humanity had already won the most important victory of all. They had proven that resistance was possible, that the Vorthak Empire was not invincible, and that sometimes the greatest weapon against overwhelming force was simple, stubborn humanity. High Admiral Kethmore's voice echoed through the throne chamber with the weight of 5 centuries of conquest. "We withdraw from the human territories. Effective immediately, all Vorthak forces will evacuate the Sol system. The species is classified as unsuitable for integration." Commander Zethkar felt a mixture of relief and shame. Relief that his career might survive this debacle. Shame that the mighty Vorthak regime was admitting defeat for the first time in their recorded history. The mathematical reality was undeniable. Humanity was costing them more resources than the entire Kepler sector generated in annual tribute. "What of the infrastructure we've established?" Sub-Commander Nethril asked. "Leave it," the High Admiral commanded. "The humans can keep their pathetic planet and their chaotic system. Perhaps their incompetence will serve as a warning to other species considering resistance." As the Vorthak fleet began its withdrawal from Earth's orbit, Sarah Chen stood in what had once been the Underground Resistance Command Center, now converted back to an abandoned maintenance tunnel. The communication device in her hand crackled with reports from around the globe. Vorthak forces were departing from every major city, their ships lifting off with the same mechanical precision they had demonstrated during the invasion. "They're really leaving," Colonel Rodriguez said, his voice filled with disbelief. "After 18 months of occupation, they're just leaving." Sarah nodded, but her expression remained grim. "This isn't over. We've wounded their pride, but we haven't defeated them. The Vorthak don't forget, and they don't forgive." Her assessment proved prophetic. As the last Vorthak transport disappeared into the void, Dr. Patel's voice crackled through the long-range communicator from the hidden Prometheus station. "Sarah, you need to hear this. We've been monitoring Vorthak communications during their withdrawal. They're not just leaving Earth alone. They're planning something called the Final Protocol. For our entire system, the intercepted intelligence painted a terrifying picture. Rather than risk further resource drain or the spread of human infection to other integrated species, the Vorthak High Command had authorized the deployment of planet-killer weapons. Sol would be sterilized completely, serving as an example to any species that might consider resistance in the future. "How long do we have?" Sarah asked, her scientific mind already racing through possibilities. "Their sterilization fleet is 3 months out," Dr. Patel replied. "They're bringing enough firepower to crack every planet in the system and ignite the sun. In those 3 months, humanity faced its greatest challenge yet. The Vorthak had left behind their surveillance networks, their processing centers, and vast amounts of technology that they considered too inferior to salvage. But they had also left humanity with a death sentence hanging over their heads. What the Vorthak didn't understand was that humans had spent 18 months studying their technology, not just to sabotage it, but to understand it. Every maintenance task, every forced training session, every interaction with Vorthak systems had been a learning opportunity. Dr. Lisa Park, the former software engineer who had learned to exploit Vorthak computer systems, made the first breakthrough. The alien databases left behind contained detailed information about regime technology, military deployments, and most importantly, the locations of other integrated species. "They kept detailed records of every species they've conquered," she reported to the hastily reformed Earth Defense Command. "Biological data, technological capabilities, strategic resources, and current assignments. We know everything about their empire." Admiral Harrison, reinstated to his former command, studied the intelligence with growing amazement. The Vorthak had conquered 47 star systems containing dozens of intelligent species. Each had been integrated into their hierarchical system, their populations assigned to roles that maximized their usefulness to the regime. "Look at this," Dr. Chen pointed to a specific entry in the database. "The Keth Ani people, conquered 80 years ago, now used primarily for precision manufacturing. Their home system was completely strip-mined, and their population relocated to industrial worlds." Similar stories repeated throughout the database. The Mordun, master shipbuilders, whose entire species now labored in Vorthak shipyards. The Zektar, whose mathematical genius had been harnessed to design regime weapon systems. The Telnari, whose artistic abilities were used to create propaganda for newly conquered worlds. 47 star systems, Admiral Harrison mused. Dozens of species with their own reasons to hate the Vorthak. And we have detailed information about all of them. 47 star systems. Assavensis. Admiral Harrison's. Admiral Harrison. Admiral Harrison. Sarah felt a cold smile spread across her face as the implications became clear. The Vorthak expect us to sit here and wait for extinction. But what if we don't? Wine. And Previa. Wine. The plan that emerged from humanity's desperate situation was audacious, beyond anything attempted in their history. Using the technological knowledge gained during the occupation and the intelligence from Vorthak databases, they would attempt to contact and coordinate with other integrated species across the regime. Dr. Patel's team at Prometheus Station became the hub of this operation. Hidden in the outer solar system, they began constructing communication arrays using hybrid human-Vorthak technology. The signals they transmitted were carefully crafted to appear as routine regime communications, while carrying hidden messages to specific target populations. The first response came from the Kethani manufacturing worlds. The message was brief and coded, but its meaning was clear. We remember freedom. We are ready. Over the following weeks, similar responses arrived from across the regime. The Mordoon shipbuilders had secretly been building vessels with hidden capabilities for decades. The Zektar had been deliberately introducing flaws into weapon designs that could be exploited. The Telnari had been creating art that subtly reminded their people of their lost independence. They've all been waiting, Sarah realized. Every species the Vorthok conquered has been preparing for an opportunity like this. The coordination network grew rapidly. Each species contributed what they could. The Kethani provided precision components for weapons. The Mordoon offered secretly constructed ships. The Zektar shared detailed knowledge of regime military weaknesses. Humanity's role was coordination and timing, using their unique position as the only species to openly resist integration. Meanwhile, the Vorthak sterilization fleet continued its approach to Sol, unaware that their empire was beginning to unravel behind them. Commander Zethkar, demoted but still commanding the operation, focused on the tactical aspects of planetary destruction. The fleet carried enough firepower to shatter worlds, and the specialized equipment needed to trigger solar instability. The humans will not have the opportunity to spread their chaos to other species, he assured his crew. After Sol's destruction, we will implement enhanced integration protocols throughout the regime to prevent similar incidents. 2 weeks before the sterilization fleet's arrival, the resistance network struck. The attack came simultaneously across 47 star systems, coordinated through the communication network that humanity had established. Every integrated species rose in rebellion at precisely the same moment. On Kethani manufacturing worlds, precisely crafted explosives destroyed regime production facilities. Mordoon shipbuilders activated hidden weapon systems in vessels throughout the regime fleet. Zektar technicians triggered the deliberately introduced flaws in regime weapon designs, causing catastrophic failures across their military infrastructure. The Telnari contributed in their own way, broadcasting art and music that carried coded messages of rebellion across every regime communication channel. Their propaganda became a rallying cry for freedom that echoed through every conquered world. Commander Zethkar received the first reports while still 2 days out from Sol. Rebellion was spreading through the regime faster than military forces could respond. Entire sectors were going dark, industrial production was collapsing, and regime fleet elements were turning against each other as sabotaged systems failed. How is this possible? He demanded of his intelligence officers. The integrated species have been compliant for decades. The answer came in the form of intercepted communications between resistance cells. The humans had somehow accessed regime databases and used that information to coordinate rebellion across the entire empire. The chaos that had plagued human integration was now spreading like a virus through every regime territory. On Vorthak Prime, High Admiral Kethmore faced the collapse of everything the regime had built over 5 centuries. Reports flooded in from every sector: rebellions, sabotage, fleet defections, and industrial collapse. The empire that had seemed invincible was disintegrating within days. The humans, he said with something approaching wonder. They have turned our strength against us. Thanks. The Vorthak had built their empire on the principle of perfect efficiency through total control. Every species, every world, every individual had their assigned role in the great machine of conquest. But that same interconnectedness made them vulnerable to coordinated resistance. When every part of the machine began working against the whole, the entire system collapsed. In the Sol system, humanity prepared for what they knew would be the final confrontation. The Vorthok sterilization fleet would arrive as planned. But now, they represented something different. Not the executioners of a defeated species, but the last desperate attempt of a dying empire to maintain control. Admiral Harrison stood on the bridge of the hastily recommissioned Earth defense platform, watching as ships arrived from across human space. Luna Base had been rebuilt with hybrid technology. The Mars colonies had constructed new defensive installations. Even the asteroid mining platforms had been converted into weapons platforms. Incoming transmission from the Vorthak fleet, Communications Officer Blake announced. Commander Zethkar appeared on the main screen. But the confident alien who had announced humanity's conquest 18 months ago was gone. His compound eyes reflected exhaustion and desperation. "I am authorized to offer terms," he announced without preamble. "Cease your coordination of regime rebellions, and we will spare your system." Admiral Harrison's reply came without hesitation. "The Vorthak regime is finished. Your empire is collapsing because you never understood what you were trying to control. Every species you conquered was just waiting for someone to show them that resistance was possible. Your resistance has cost millions of lives across the galaxy," Zethkar accused. "Your conquest cost billions," Sarah Chen interrupted, stepping into camera view. "Every species you integrated lost their freedom, their culture, their right to determine their own destiny. We've simply reminded them that they had the power to take it back." The final battle for Sol lasted 6 hours. The Vorthak fleet was technologically superior, but their ships had been built in Mordun shipyards with hidden vulnerabilities. Their weapons incorporated Zektar designs with deliberately introduced flaws. Their computers ran on systems that the Resistance Network had learned to exploit during the occupation. When the last Vorthak ship fled toward the edge of the system, it marked more than humanity's victory. It represented the end of the largest empire in galactic history, and the beginning of a new age of cooperation between species that had learned to value freedom over efficiency. Years later, as representatives from dozens of formerly integrated species gathered on Earth for the first Galactic Freedom Council, Sarah Chen reflected on the strange path that had led to this moment. The Vorthak had invaded Earth, expecting to add another obedient species to their empire. Instead, they had encountered a species that refused to be broken, refused to submit, and ultimately refused to let others remain in chains. The Vorthak regime still existed, reduced to their home system and a handful of loyal worlds. But their age of conquest was over. Ended not by superior firepower or advanced technology, but by the simple human conviction that freedom was worth any cost. Commander Zethkar, now living in exile on a remote Vorthak colony, sometimes reviewed the intelligence reports from that fateful invasion. The data was clear. Humans had possessed no significant military advantages, no superior technology, no special capabilities that hadn't been seen in other species. What they had possessed was something the Vorthak could never understand or replicate: the absolute refusal to accept that resistance was futile. In the end, it is hold of views that had been enough to topple an empire that had stood for 5 centuries. The galaxy was free, and it would remember that freedom had been delivered not by warriors or weapons, but by ordinary humans who simply refused to give up. The Vorthak had learned too late that some species cannot be conquered, only destroyed. And humanity had proven that destroying them would cost more than any empire could afford to pay.